The cabin of Flight 714 hummed with the low, steady sound of engines slicing through the sky. Soft yellow lights lined the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the rows of seats, but the tension inside row 2 felt anything but warm. 12-year-old Maya sat stiffly in her seat, hands wrapped tightly around her phone, knuckles pale. The leather beneath her felt expansive, unfamiliar, and heavy with judgment. She didn't belong here, at least not according to the eyes drilling into her from the aisle. Maya had never flown first class before. She still wasn't sure how it happened. Her father had surprised her that morning, smiling nervously as he handed her the boarding pass. "It's just for you," he'd said. "You earned it." She'd thought it was a mistake. First class was for business people, celebrities, and people who didn't look like her. But the ticket was real. Seat to a window, first class. Now she wished she'd stayed in economy. The woman standing over her was blonde, sharply dressed, and furious. Her face was red, her jaw tight, her eyes burning with entitlement. "I said, get out of that seat," the woman snapped, loud enough for nearby passengers to turn their heads. "That seat is not for you." Maya's heart pounded. She swallowed hard and shook her head slowly. "Ma'am, this is my seat," she said quietly, her voice barely steady. She tilted her phone to show her boarding pass, hands trembling. "It says to a..." The woman laughed, sharp and cruel. "Oh, please, don't play games with me. You think I don't know how this works?" She pointed a manicured finger inches from Maya's face. "You kids always try to sneak into places you don't belong." A man seated across the aisle shifted uncomfortably. Another passenger looked down, pretending not to hear. The flight attendant was still several rows away, busy stowing bags. Maya felt heat rise in her chest. Her ears rang. She hated the way everyone was looking at her like she was doing something wrong just by sitting still. "I didn't sneak," she whispered. "My dad bought the ticket." That's when the woman leaned in closer, her smile turning thin and dangerous. "Listen carefully," she hissed. "My husband is a very important man. If you don't move right now, I'll make sure you never fly again. My dad will fire you. Do you understand me?" Maya blinked. Fire her. She was 12. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Crying would only prove their point. She hugged her phone to her chest, shoulders curling inward as if she could disappear into the seat. Behind the woman, a man in a gray suit watched silently. He looked calm, almost amused, as if the scene unfolding was mild entertainment. When Maya's eyes met his, he offered a small smile that made her stomach twist. He didn't say a word. The woman straightened suddenly and raised her voice. "This is unbelievable. I paid thousands of dollars to fly first class, and now I have to sit next to this." She gestured toward Maya like she was an object, something dirty. "This airline is a joke." A murmur rippled through the cabin. A few passengers shifted. One woman near the window frowned, clearly uncomfortable. Still, no one intervened. Maya's chest felt tight. She thought about her dad waiting at home, how proud he'd been, how he'd said this was her moment. She thought about all the times she'd been told she didn't belong, all the times she'd swallowed her feelings and stayed quiet. "Not this time. I'm not moving," Maya said. Her voice shook, but the words were clear. The woman's face hardened. "Excuse me," she snapped. "Do you know who you're talking to?" Before Maya could answer, a calm voice cut through the tension. "Ma'am, is there a problem here?" The flight attendant had arrived. The woman spun around instantly, her expression flipping like a switch. "Yes, there's a problem," she said sweetly. "This girl is in my seat." The attendant looked down at Maya's phone, then at the woman. "According to her boarding pass, this is her assigned seat." The woman scoffed. "That must be a mistake. Look at her. She's clearly not supposed to be up here." The words hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. The attendant's smile faded. "Ma'am, everyone with a first-class ticket is supposed to be up here." Silence followed. Thick, uncomfortable. The man in the gray suit finally spoke. "Honey, maybe we should just let it go." The woman shot him a glare. "Absolutely not. I will not sit next to her. Either she moves or I do." The attendant straightened. "Then you may move, ma'am. We cannot remove a passenger from their assigned seat without cause." The woman's mouth fell open. "This is outrageous." That may be, the attendant replied evenly, but it's also policy. A few passengers nodded subtly. Someone in the row behind Maya whispered, "Good." The woman grabbed her bag angrily and stormed down the aisle, muttering under her breath about lawsuits and ruined flights. The man followed, avoiding eye contact. Maya sat frozen, unsure what to do. Her heart still raced, her hands still shook. The attendant leaned down gently. "You okay?" Maya nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "I think so." As the plane taxied down the runway, Maya stared out the window. The clouds stretched endlessly, soft and bright, like a promise. For the first time since boarding, she allowed herself a small smile. She hadn't moved. She hadn't apologized. She had stayed. And for once, the world had moved around her instead. The smile on Maya's face didn't last long. Relief faded into something heavier, something more complicated. Her hands still trembled in her lap, even after the seatbelt sign chimed on. She felt exposed, like the entire cabin had memorized her face. Some people smiled at her now, quietly approving. Others stared a second too long, curiosity mixed with something else she couldn't name. She hated that part the most. A man across the aisle leaned toward her. "You handled that well," he said softly, offering a gentle nod. His voice was kind, but Maya didn't know how to respond. Compliments felt strange after humiliation. She just nodded and looked back out the window. As the plane lifted into the sky, her stomach flipped, not from fear of flying, but from the delayed impact of everything that had just happened. Her body was catching up to the moment her mind had been forced to survive. Minutes passed. The flight attendants began their service, pushing carts down the aisle, voices practiced and calm. One of them stopped beside Maya. "Would you like something to drink, sweetheart?" Maya hesitated. In economy, she'd always been afraid to ask for anything extra. Here, the question felt like a test. Water is fine," she said. The attendant smiled warmly and handed her a glass. "If you want anything else, just let me know." Maya wrapped both hands around the glass. It was cold, grounding, real. She thought the worst was over. She was wrong. Half an hour into the flight, raised voices echoed from several rows back. The same sharp, familiar tone sliced through the hum of the cabin. Maya's shoulders stiffened instantly. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. "This is discrimination," the woman shouted. "I was embarrassed in front of everyone. That girl should never have been placed there in the first place." Maya's throat tightened. Her chest felt hollow. She stared at the seat in front of her, willing herself to disappear. The flight attendant responded calmly, but firmly. "Ma'am, please lower your voice." "I will not," the woman snapped. "I want the captain. I want corporate. I want this fixed." Passengers sighed. Someone groaned quietly. A child began to cry a few rows away, tension spreading like smoke. The woman continued. "People like her are always given special treatment. It's reverse discrimination." The words hit Maya like a slap. She squeezed her hands together, nails biting into her palms. Then something unexpected happened. A woman stood up. She was older, maybe in her late 40s, dressed simply, no designer labels, no polished arrogance. She turned to face the aisle, her voice steady but loud enough to carry. "That's enough." The cabin went silent. "You humiliated a child," the woman continued. "You threatened her. You lied. And now you're trying to play the victim. Sit down." The blonde woman stared at her in shock. "Mind your business." "It is my business," the woman replied. "It became everyone's business the moment you decided to be cruel in public." A few passengers murmured agreement. Someone clapped once, softly, then stopped. The man in the gray suit tugged on his wife's arm. "Please," he whispered, "just sit down." She yanked her arm away. "Don't touch me." The flight attendant stepped in again, her voice no longer polite. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. If you continue to disrupt the flight, we will take further action." For a moment, it looked like the woman might explode. Her lips trembled, eyes darting around the cabin, realizing she was no longer in control. Slowly, angrily, she dropped into her seat. The air shifted. Maya exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. She didn't notice the tears until they slipped down her cheeks and landed on her shirt. She wiped them quickly, embarrassed, but another passenger leaned over and handed her a napkin without a word. Maya whispered a small thank you. Later, when the cabin lights dimmed, Maya finally allowed herself to think. Not about the woman, but about herself. About why sitting in a seat had felt like an act of rebellion. About why she had been expected to justify her existence. She remembered school hallways where teachers watched her more closely than others. Those stores where security guards followed her quietly. The moments she'd brushed off, convinced herself she was imagining things. Now she knew she wasn't. Hours later, as the plane began its descent, the captain's voice filled the cavern. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly." Maya felt something settle inside her. Not happiness, strength. When the plane touched down and passengers stood to grab their bags, the woman in first class avoided Maya completely. She stared straight ahead, lips pressed tight, pretending Maya didn't exist. But Maya noticed something else. People noticed her, not with suspicion, with respect. As Maya stepped into the aisle, a man smiled and said, "Have a great day." Another woman squeezed her shoulder gently. "You're brave," she whispered. Maya didn't feel brave. She felt tired. But she also felt taller somehow. At baggage claim, she spotted her father immediately. He stood near the railing, scanning faces anxiously. When he saw her, relief flooded his expression. "Maya," he called. She ran to him, dropping her bag, burying her face in his jacket. He hugged her tightly. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice low. She nodded against his chest. "Yeah, I am." As they walked toward the exit, Maya glanced back once, thinking of the seat, the stairs, the moment she chose not to move. She realized something important. The seat had never been the problem. The problem was the world's expectation that she should give up space to make others comfortable, and she was done doing that.